Chris Hulburt is director of the Training Institute at the National Conflict Resolution Center, the NCRC. The Twitter handle is at NCRC Online. He's going to give us some hints on how to talk politics, family, etc. Of course, the holidays are coming. Chris, welcome. Thank you for being on the show today.
Good morning, Tim. Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you.
So we're trying to figure out, okay, you've got friends and family, you're gathered, or you're at some point even encountering one another, and you have different points of view. And especially in something as hotly contested as this election, it's not just about the issues, it's about how this whole thing is proceeding. What do you recommend to people?
Yeah, well, you already started with maybe the most important thing, which is encountering one another. So often what people are doing is avoiding and just separating, and relationships are falling apart, and people are not talking to each other, instead becoming more and more isolated in their own perspective and their own ideas. The first most important step is to actually be willing to have the courageous conversation with somebody you disagree with. And then so that involves overcoming some of the fears and concerns about how that conversation is going to go. And at the National Conflict Resolution Center, we have some real clear strategies on how to do that. I want to tell you about a conversation I had with a young woman, on Wednesday, day after Election Day. She says to me, "I can't believe that half the nation voted in favor of racism." And I said, wow, there it is. Clearly, that means she voted with racism in mind, and she was trying to make a vote, against racism. But she ascribed motivation to all the other people who voted different from her. It tells you about her vote, but it doesn't tell us anything about other people's votes. She already labeled them. She gave them, evil intent, and then she starts to dismiss them and write them off. That's the problem. We have to be willing to talk to each other, ask questions with curiosity and respect. Why? What is your perspective? Where'd that come from? What are you thinking? What's your goal? And then be willing to find common ground. Because the truth is, there's something that we all share. We're all seeking very much the same goals in the nation. We might be seeking it in different pathways, but we have to be willing to talk to each other and stop throwing rocks at each other.
Are we at a different place in our history, in your mind, as far as these kinds of conflicts are concerned?
I do think that we are more and more polarized, certainly more polarized than any time that I can recall in my lifetime. And part of that is because we have such clear access to polarizing sources, whether it's social media or the 24-hour news channels, that all have their own focus. And if you're only listening to one thing or receiving one source of information, then we become more and more isolated from each other. And so the most important thing to rebuild this nation with a sense of community and common purpose is to be willing to talk to people who have different opinions and to engage with curiosity, not with criticism, not even with argument, but to ask questions with curiosity and to listen and to repeat back and say, so what you're thinking is this, what you're looking for is this, to acknowledge that you understand. Understanding the other's opinion doesn't mean you agree with it, but we have to listen to why people think the way they think and respect that so that we can find common ground on something and begin to work together.
Chris Hulburt is with us, director with the National Conflict Resolution Center. You are an experienced mediator, and clearly when two people who don't want to talk to each other are thrown into a room, it helps to have somebody to facilitate that conversation, a mediator like yourself. Who is the mediator in this national conversation right now? Doesn't sound like the president is.
Oh, that's a great question. That's probably part of our problem. What we see most loudly in all directions are voices that are separating us and voices that are feeding the sort of polarization and demonization of the opponent. And that is always destructive. And so that's a brilliant question. At the National Conflict Resolution Center, we have an initiative that we've been engaged in for the last 2 years that we call A Path Forward. And it's designed to do two things: to train people how to have courageous conversations, and then to bring people together in a facilitated dialogue to create a safe space where people of diverse backgrounds and diverse ideas can actually sit with each other. Right today, it's in a virtual environment, and so anybody anywhere in the nation can participate in a facilitated conversation where you can actually listen to each other, engage each other, and draw closer together to create relationship. So I don't see a national leader that is doing a great job at bringing people together. This week, it looks like Joe Biden is trying to do that in his public comments. But on the news channels, it's very much, creating conflict, creating division. We have to get past conflict and toward finding each other as people, engaging in one-to-one real conversations with neighbors. It's the basic, hard work of creating relationship and recreating community.
Chris, this may not be a brilliant question like the last one was, and thank you for that. But I did want to ask, this is a little bit different from, for example, legislative back and forth where you have compromise. Well, you want this, but if you want this, I can give you this. In this particular case, we're talking about a contest. There will be one winner. There will be one loser. So how do you get over that? Because somebody's going to have to accept a defeat.
Well, so I would push beyond that if we could. Do we have to decide that our individual identity is wrapped up with whether one candidate wins or loses? And I want to encourage that we do not accept that as what our identity is about. We, the people of the nation, have the ability to come together and create relationship with our neighbors and with community members who disagree with us, no matter what's happening at the national level or at the elected level. The truth is, it's the people who are going to drive the culture and the spirit of the nation on whether or not we're going to cooperate with each other. And we don't need to give ourselves over to the separating rhetoric that takes place at the national level. So, again, at the National Conflict Resolution Center, we would not wait for the politicians to lead us and tell us what to do. Rather, we would create community and create relationships, find common solutions, get the work done. The politicians will always follow the mood of the people.
Is your sense that kind of does go on anyway? I know we watch TV. There does seem to be a distillation of the conflict in this country, but by and large, I don't see fistfights breaking out at local grocery stores, and I don't see the kinds of fire that we often see, hair on fire stuff that I see on TV a lot. I don't know if you have a broader sense of the country at large.
Well, I think that's it exactly. I believe, quite frankly, that we are not as polarized as it looks when you're watching TV or especially when you're on social media. There probably is a vast middle, a vast purple in the nation. In fact, we're working on a book called The Purple Nation. There is a vast purple middle in this nation, and then there are very loud voices on the opposite ends. The loud voices tend to get all the attention in the national discussion. But the people in the middle still want to come together to create solutions and move forward. And that can be done. And there are ways to come together to find common solutions. It starts with respecting the other person, their right to have an opinion, and a willingness to engage in a courageous conversation to hear what they have to say and why, and then work together to find common solutions to common problems.
Chris, I appreciate the time on POTUS, and we'll certainly follow up once the book is out. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, you're welcome, Tim.
Chris Hulburt, director with the National Conflict Resolution Center, an experienced mediator. Some thoughts on how to deal with this tension that we have between one another and among different groups, and some thoughts on how we should look at things, give a perspective on it. He is tweeting at NCRC Online.